Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Mazza on Ravens, our second one this week and our second one in a row. Yesterday, we recapped and talked about the Ravens signing of Jaire Alexander. Jaire Alexander is a Baltimore Raven, so you can check that out on the channel from yesterday's show. Today, we'll still talk a bit about the Jaire Alexander signing and just a little bit about it. But today is mostly about recapping minicamp, what we heard and learned about from minicamp in these last few days, these last few days of practices, comments and reports around the team from players and coaches, and what's going on, what to look forward to, and what to expect, what to look forward to, and what to expect once we get to training camp. But obviously, the big news out of Baltimore this week is the signing of Jaire Alexander. We'll talk about that just a little bit after we talked about it yesterday. But today, I want to get into mainly today. I want to get into comments about Mark Andrews that Lamar Jackson had, which I thought was very interesting and also very encouraging, and I thought was really cool, and I thought was showed the kind of leader and kind of quarterback that Jackson is, going back for his teammate the way he did. We'll get into his comments. We'll talk about Mark Andrews and his future with the team, and Isaiah Likely's future with the team. Those are a couple of reports by Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. We'll talk about the Ravens kicker situation. Uh, Seems like they'll be going to training camp with a big question mark at kicker. Obviously, we knew that going in with with Justin Tucker no longer on the team, but seems to me we'll really be heading into training camp with a big question at kicker with the Ravens. We'll talk about obviously the possible extension of Lamar Jackson. When will that happen? What kind of money he could get coming in, and what to look for. We talk about a big retirement from a former Raven that came today. We'll talk about the guard position that the Ravens are coming into training camp with, another competition, and also a little more about their offensive line. But we're going to lead in and begin today with Lamar's comments about Mark Andrews. Obviously, the big story of the offseason, aside from Justin Tucker, was the status of Mark Andrews. What's going to happen? Is he still going to be on the team next year? Everyone was all up in arms about what's going to happen to Mark Andrews after the Buffalo Bills playoff game last year. Nobody really knew. He's coming off a season where he started off slow, but really picked it up and played really well towards the last 11 to 12 games of the season, but didn't really make much of an impact during the Steeler playoff game. And against Buffalo, he had the fumble in the second half, and he had, of course, the drop pass at the very end of the game. I've mentioned this before. I don't think it was all his fault. I think the defense could have been a little bit better against the Bills' offense. Jackson had a couple of early turnovers in the first half. So again, it wasn't all his fault. They put themselves in a pretty bad spot in the second half. You cannot be down 11 points. Okay. You can't be down 11 points at halftime at Buffalo. You can't be down 11 points at halftime at all, no matter where you are playing in the playoffs, but especially in Buffalo against that team in that environment, against that quarterback. You cannot be down 11 points at halftime. So they put themselves in that spot. They had to work their way to get back into the game, and it gets tough. So I don't blame it all on Mark Andrews. I still think he's a tremendous player and one of the best tight ends in all of football. And Lamar Jackson's top playmaker and top target. And you knew the biggest reason for Andrews to stay was his connection to Lamar Jackson. Look, the bottom line is this: your franchise quarterback needs to have their top guys to perform well and to play well and to have that chemistry. Look, Lamar a few years ago lost that with Hollywood Brown when they traded him to Arizona. Him and Hollywood were close; they had a good connection, and then they traded him a few years later because Hollywood was unhappy with his role in the Greg Roman offense, and he was unhappy with the offense itself. Ravens weren't happy with him; they weren't going to pay him, and they traded him. We can go back to, of course, after Joe Flacco got his big contract extension after he won the Super Bowl with the Ravens, they went and traded Anquan Bolden. That wasn't a good move. Then a year later, they let Torrey Smith leave for San Francisco. That wasn't a good move either. So you have to have your playmaker, your franchise quarterback's playmakers stay on the team. That's how you got to succeed. And I think the Ravens have done a better job of that of late with the re-signing of Rashad Bateman, and now I think keeping Mark Andrews. They couldn't find, obviously, there was no trade partner, I guess, for Mark Andrews. They didn't release him. There was no trade partner. But they kept him around. And I think a big reason they kept him around is because A, he's still one of the best times in football, and B, Lamar Jackson is a big fan of his, and they have a great connection. And Lamar after the first couple of days of practice, or the first day of practice at minicamp, defended Mark Andrews, went to bat for him, and really again showed his support for his star tight end. He said, "quote I really don't like that because and he Andrews has done so much for us. How people did him after the playoff game against Buffalo, I just don't like that. Mark's still Mark. I just seen people trying to dog him on comments. He's accomplished so much for us and himself. He's Mandrews. Yeah, you know, you again, yeah, you love that. You love hearing that from your quarterback, and you love hearing that from the franchise quarterback and the franchise player. But he's right. It's not just optics, and you like hearing that, but he's right. Mark Andrews has been a very productive player for the Baltimore Ravens during his now going on 8 years with the team. He's arguably, you can make a case, actually, no, there is no case to be made. It's what it is. He is the best playmaking receiver slash tight end, either him or Todd Heap, the Ravens have ever drafted. In terms of guys they've drafted, playmakers, tight ends, wide receiver, it's Mark Andrews and Todd Heap. It's Mark Andrews and Todd Heap. And you can make a case Mark Andrews is over Todd Heap. I would disagree because Todd Heap did it with everybody. Todd Heap in his prime was terrific. People forget how good Todd Heap was, but in his prime, he was terrific. And he did it with all the quarterbacks. He did it with Elvis Gerbach in his rookie year, Cunningham his rookie year as the backup to Shannon Sharp. Then he did with Chris Redman. Then he did with Chris Redman, Jeff Blake, Kyle Bowler, Anthony Wright, Troy Smith, of the 33, 34, 35-year-old Steve McNair. Then he finally got Flacco in Flacco's first 3 years, but by then Todd Heap had already been battling injuries and he wasn't prime Todd Heap. I mean, Flacco, a prime coming into the league, Flacco and a prime Todd Heap would have been pretty fun to watch. But it's Flacco and it's Mark Andrews in terms of the best. It's Todd Heap and it's Mark Andrews in terms of the best wide receivers and tight ends this team has ever drafted. You know, Andrews has been that guy for 8 years, and yeah, he hasn't been good in the playoffs. I agree 1,000%. His playoff numbers aren't good, but neither is anybody else on this team. There's nobody else on the Ravens' playoff numbers that are good. That includes the quarterback. That includes the quarterback. You know, their numbers together, Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson. Andrews has not 379 catches for 4,829 yards and 48 touchdowns in 95 games with Lamar Jackson at quarterback since the middle of 2018 when Jackson took over. We can talk about that all we want. We can talk about the numbers and the playoffs and stuff. We can talk about that. We can talk about Andrews and dropping passes, but the fact of the matter is, those are some very good numbers. And the fact of the matter is, the Ravens are a better team with Andrews than they are without him. And Lamar Jackson knows that. Lamar Jackson knows that. And just for him to go to bat for Andrews, I think is shows the type of camaraderie that these two have, and it shows the kind of leader Jackson is. Because Jackson hadn't really talked about it that much. Obviously, he did talk about it a bit after the game, and again, he went it right. He immediately after that Bills game, he went and took accountability. Said, "Hey, I made some two costly turnovers. Can't have that happen." And now today, months later, here in June, and I think it's a great thing, and it shows for him to come out and defend Andrews like that and to defend his tight end and defend his playmaker. It shows the type of chemistry these two have. It shows the type of camaraderie these two have. It shows the kind of leader that Jackson is. And it shows that, these two together, I think, are going to be in for a big season. Along with Isaiah Likely. Don't worry. Isaiah Likely is still going to get his catches and he'll still get his touchdowns. We'll talk about Isaiah Likely next. But still Isaiah Likely, but Jackson and Andrews, that's still the key. That is still the big target, the big QB tight end, that is still the big QB tight end, combo that the Ravens have and one of the biggest, and one of the best combos the Ravens have overall on the team, along with Jackson and Derrick Henry, along with Jackson and Zay Flowers. Hey, Lamar's got his weapons. He's got Mark Andrews. He's got Isaiah Likely. You know, he's got Isaiah Likely. He's got Rashad Bateman. He's now got DeAndre Hopkins. He's got Derrick Henry. He's had Mark Andrews for the past 7 years, going on 8. It's hard to simply get rid of that. It's hard to simply just trade that away. Just trade that away, release him because oh, he had a bad drop in the playoffs. Yeah, he did, but Again, he's not the reason why they lost. Mark Andrews is not the reason why they lost. You know, right now though, Andrews does carry a heavy cap hit number. This, I think, could could be, you know, Andrews's big season that he needs to have to kind of prove to. Andrews has a lot to prove. He does. Last year of his contract, Isaiah Lackley's behind him. I think he needs to. I think he's going to go out there and he's got to prove to not only the Ravens but to the entire NFL that he's still one of the best tight ends in football. You know, and he could bounce back from that from the playoff game last year. He could bounce back from the fumble. He could bounce back from the drop 2 point conversion. And I think he and Lamar are going to do everything they can to make sure that happens, to make sure Andrews bounces back and has a big season. And for the Ravens, that gives you the saying, okay, yeah, we'll keep you around. We'll resign you. Or another team even will just pop up and say, hey, we'll resign you. But I think, Jackson's comment speaks a lot of volumes about not only Jackson and his feelings about Andrews, but I think it also speaks volumes for, you know, the whole team. The whole team. If Jackson is saying this about Andrews, then I can tell you right now, the whole team feels that way about Mark Andrews. You know, I could tell you right. You could if the quarterback is saying that about Andrews, then the whole team is feeling that way about Andrews. The whole team is with him, and the whole team is going to defend him. The whole team is going to be a rally around him, and they're going to make sure that he has a good year and they have a good year and go as far as they can. So I think this is really good for Lamar, and I think yeah, he's right. Like yeah, there were a lot of people this offseason saying, "Oh, Andrew stinks. He stinks. He stinks. He stinks. He stinks." People forgot Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is Mark Andrews. He's one of the best tight ends in football, one of the best playmakers in football overall, tight end and receivers. Tight ends, receivers, and running backs. He's one of the best there is in football. He's been that way since 2018, 2019. I get the playoff numbers. I really do. He hasn't been good in the playoffs, but neither has anybody else on this team. And that includes the quarterback. That includes the quarterback. It's a whole, I don't want, I don't want to sound so cliche and say, hey, it's a whole team effort thing, but it is. I don't think it's that cliche. It is a cliche thing, but I don't think it's that cliche. It is. The bottom line is when the Ravens hit January, they find ways to, you know, they find ways to not play the way they're capable of playing. And it's everybody. It's Andrews. It's Jackson. It's the offensive line. It's the coaching. It's receivers. It's defense. It's the lack of a running game. There's so much that happens in a Ravens playoff game since 2018 where you look at and go, hey, what happened to the team I watched in September and October, November, December? And you could place on any one thing, but it's never just one thing. Hey, as Ray Lewis once said after they lost the 2011 AFC title game, as Ray Lewis once said after they lost the 2011 AFC title game, ain't about one thing, it ain't about one play, it ain't about nothing. It's not about one play. It's not about one thing. Heck, I'll even quote Ray Lewis during his Football Life documentary when talking about the 2011 AFC Championship game. Oh, Lee should have caught the ball. Billy should have kicked. Billy should have made the kick. Maybe I should have made a tackle in the third quarter. It's everybody, and that's the thing. You know, that's the thing. It's not just one guy, and Lamar knows that, and the Ravens know that. Lamar and the Ravens know that. It's not just Mark Andrews. The fans may feel that way. The fans may, but it's not. So good on Jackson for coming out and showing his leadership, backing up his number one playmaker, backing up his star tight end, and backing up his guy, his draft peer, his draft teammate. Those two came into the league together in 2018. Lamar in the first round, Andrews in, I believe, the second, third round. Let me see. Sometimes I mix him and Orlando Brown Jr. up when they were drafted. I want to say Andrews was drafted in the second round, third round, excuse me, third round. Yeah, again, I I get mixed up with Andrews and Brown when they were drafting. So, I get, but still, the point being is Jackson was drafted in 2018, Andrews drafted in 2018. They have come together, they have been together. They came into the NFL, not just the Ravens, but to the NFL as rookies together. They have been through so much together as a quarterback tight end duo for the past seven, now going on 8 years. They've won a lot of games together. Hey, they have won some playoff games. They've won three playoff games together. Um, they've rode with each other for forever. They've known each other since they were drafted together. One out of Louisville, one out of Oklahoma. You know, you know, and I think they have that mentality, and I think Jackson especially has it with Andrews that they want to finish this journey together. They want to hoist that trophy together. They want to hoist it together. So I think that's another big reason why you see a comment like that from Jackson that he's coming in defending for his guy. He said he didn't like the way people were talking about him. Yeah, people were talking about Mark Andrews like he was a bum, like he stink, like he was an awful, awful player. When really that's not true at all. He's a very good player. I understand the emotion. I get it. I get the emotion. I do. Hey, believe it or not, the drop ball by Lee Evans didn't make me think Lee Evans was a bad football player. Lee Evans actually had a pretty good career, folks. You know, Lee Evans actually had a pretty productive career for himself. Even Billy Cundiff made a Pro Bowl like the year before the missed kick. And he came in 2009 when the Ravens not getting any production at the kicker position after Matt Stover went to the Colts, or excuse me, he went to the Colts in free agency. But they decided to go with Stephen Hauschka for the 2009 season. Hauschka really struggled. Cundiff came in. They signed Cundiff, and Cundiff was pretty good the rest of the year. And then he made the Pro Bowl the following year. The missed kick didn't make me forget that Billy Cundiff was a bad kicker. He just made a bad kick. The Lee Evans drop pass didn't make me think all of a sudden Lee Evans is a bad football player. No, Lee Evans is actually a pretty good player with a pretty productive career in Buffalo. Mark Andrews' fumble and drop didn't make me forget he wasn't a good football player. Lamar Jackson's struggles in the playoffs don't make me forget he's not a bad football player. Don't make me forget he's a bad football player. Dude's really good. And so is Andrews. He's really good. So, do they all need to be productive in the playoffs? Absolutely, because that is what matters for this team. What matters for this team is January and February. That's why they got Jaire Alexander. It's why they got Jaire Alexander to be productive in January, to win. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's what it's about. But it doesn't take away that Andrews is a really good football player. Really good. Like he's really good, dude. Heck, you can make the case over the past 2 years, he's been better than Travis Kelce. You can make the case. Travis Kelce has certainly slowed down the last couple of years. Yeah, they still hasn't stopped the Chiefs from winning the Super Bowl and going to back-to-back Super Bowls, but you can make the case that Mark Andrews has been better than Travis Kelce over the past couple of years. You can certainly make that case. You know, you can certainly make that case that he's been better than Travis Kelce over the last 2 years. Matter of fact, let's pop up the numbers because Kelce has certainly had a couple of years where he hasn't really looked like Travis Kelce, and that comes with the territory. Sometimes also comes with the fact that he plays in, you know, that he's been playing in every year in January and late February. Oh, you know, but you can make the case he's been better. You can make the case Andrew's been better. Andrew scored 11 touchdowns last year. Travis had better numbers reception wise and receiving yards wise, but he only found the end zone 3 times last year. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews found the end zone 11 times last year. He found the end zone 11 times last year. So look, you can make the case over the past couple of years that Andrews has been better, or certainly more productive than Travis Kelce has been. So look, the dude's a very good tight end. He's very good, and he's very good at finding the end zone. So I don't think Lamar Jackson wants to lose that. I think Jackson wants his guy on the team for as long as he can have him, for as long as he can get. And I applaud Jackson for going out there and defending his guy. I applaud him for going out there and defending his guy. Good for him. I say good for him, and that shows him how good of a leader he is, and what he means for the team as their franchise quarterback. Because no matter how, to have your top guys back, but also, a guy that you've been in the league with for a long time. You both came into the league together, and they have one goal, and they've had one goal in mind. They've had one goal in mind for 8 years, and that's to win a Super Bowl. And I think they want to win a Super Bowl together. So, speaking of Mark Andrews and speaking of Isaiah Likely, there were a couple of reports by Ian Rappaport yesterday by both of them. Because again, it is going to be an interesting dynamic between the two. You have Andrews, you have Likely. One's now entering his eighth season. The other one is entering his fourth season and contract. Both are now in contract years. One's younger than the other. The Ravens see a bright future for one, and you know, we'll see what the future holds for Andrews, but they certainly see a bright future for Likely. So, but to start off with Mark Andrews, this is per NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, that the Ravens have still been getting trade interest from some teams for Mark Andrews. However, Rappaport says the Ravens have held on to Andrews all offseason. That's not necessarily expected to change, even though the veteran is entering the final year of his contract. He's gotten votes of confidence from key figures like like John Harbaugh, Eric DaCosta, and most recently Lamar Jackson. In minicamp this week, I'll have said some variation that Andrews is a great player. Yeah, I'm not surprised that the Ravens are still getting trade interest. Um, as mini camp and training camp as mini camp has come, and now training camp is about to come next month. I'm not surprised that they're still getting trade interest. Um, I would expect maybe I could see some team maybe making an offer, but yeah, at this point, I just think at this point, now that we're in June and the draft is, if Andrews was going to get traded, I think it would have happened before the draft. But now that it's after the draft, I think he's going to be on the team come September, week one, when they play the Buffalo Bills. Ironically enough, it's Sunday Night Football in Buffalo against the Bills. You know, so I think at this point, yeah, he's staying. He's on the team, whether you like it or not. If you're a Ravens fan and you like it or not, he's still going to be on the team. And again, I think he's going to be very productive for the Baltimore Ravens in 2025 for this offense that's expected to do a lot of great things. So, not surprised. I think not surprised. Again, I think teams will still call the Ravens to gauge interest. Maybe if they see Likely have a good preseason, maybe they go, "Hey Ravens, you see this Isaiah Likely kid, he's looking good. We'll give you a third or fourth or whatever for Andrews." I wouldn't be surprised if teams are still trying to get the Ravens to trade Andrews sometime during August in the preseason before week one. But I think at this point, again, I think he's a Raven for this season. What happens in 2026, we'll see what happens. But I think for this season, yeah, he's going to be on the team. And I think he's going to be very productive. I think Lamar Jackson's comments helps the team, helps make the team with Andrews and with Andrews. You know, Jackson's comments, keep your quarterback happy, keep your quarterback with his top guy. I think, you know, I think that gives you another big reason why Andrews will be on the team again, even with the team still inquiring and trading for him. But again, Andrews, again, I think if they were going to trade him, I think it would have happened before the draft. But now that it's after the draft, it's 2 months after the draft now. We're about to go into training camp next month. Andrews on the team. He's on the team. 89 will be suiting up for the Baltimore Ravens in 2025 in week one when they play the Buffalo Bills. I think he'll have a very good productive season. Now, from 89 to likely 80. There was a report by Ian Rapport about Isaiah Likely. Reportedly, he is one of the team's top extension candidates heading into the season. Rapport says Baltimore sees Likely as the future of the tight end position, even though Mark Andrews is still currently expected to remain in Baltimore and have a big role this season. Both players in the final year of their contracts. So it would make a lot of sense for the Ravens to try and push the lock up at least one, and Likely's youth makes him a compelling candidate. John Harbaugh said earlier this offseason he thinks Likely has a ton of potential, which he does. He's got a ton of potential. John Harbaugh said via Pro Football Talk, "I want to see Likely be an all-pro. That'd be my goal for him, and he's capable of it." Yeah. Look, we got a good sense of what Isaiah Likely could do in 2023 when Andrews was out with an injury, and he played really well. He played really well that season, and 2023, really, that was his first true chance to play. He 30 catches, 411 yards, 5 touchdowns. Last year, 42 catches, 477 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And he made a couple of really nice catches for this team 2 years ago and even last year. It is, again, it's a little bit tough for Likely to get consistent snaps because, again, 89 is there, Mark Andrews is there, but this is a pretty good, this is a young stud tight end that they have that Eric DeCosta found in the draft a couple of years ago, late in the draft a couple of years ago in the fourth round in 2022. And he's shown a ton of, he's only 25 years old. He turns 26 next season. So that'll really be his first. So next season would really be his first chance to really start and shine, barring anything. If Andrews does get traded, but again, I don't think that's happening. Not now because again, before the draft, but now it's after the draft. But Isaiah Likely has a ton of potential, and he's 25, going to be 26 next year. He's shown you what he can do over the last 2 years. He's shown you that for a number two tight end, he's good enough to be a number one, and he's big and he's athletic. He essentially can line up as a wide receiver. That's what Todd Monken essentially lined him up as. With Andrews still number one tight end, they've essentially lined up Likely as a receiver. So Likely essentially has become an extra big bodied receiver for Jackson in that offense and under Todd Monken. So, but again, I expect, along with other contract extensions, obviously the Ravens still got to get the contract done with Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about that later. Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Lindenbaum. But Isaiah Likely's contract, I think they're definitely gonna get done. I think Isaiah Likely will get an extension done sometime before training camp, maybe even during training camp. I think he's gonna get an extension because I think the Ravens love him. They're high on him. They love his big playability. They love his jumping, big catch ability. They love that he's there to get first downs. He can get in the end zone for touchdowns. They love that about him. And like I said, he's 6'4", 247 pounds. He can line up as a receiver for now with Andrews is still the number one tight end. He can come in for Andrews if Andrews needs a break or maybe if Andrews has to miss time with an injury. But even still, you know, but even still, this is a very good situation for the Ravens to have. The Ravens can have, a very good two tight end duo. You know, that's what they have right now. And that's why that was another reason why, you know, you know, that was another reason why I wasn't really in favor of trading Andrews. I was like, don't you want to have a tight end duo like this? Don't you? I understand Monken has the five wide offense, but man, that's a really good tight end combo to have. That's a really good tight end combo to have. I remember, Pitta and Dixon, they could have been something really good if Dixon blossomed into what he could have been and Pitta stayed healthy. But, for a brief period, they looked like a pretty good tight end combo. Back in 2001, Shannon Sharp and Todd Heap together. 2010, Todd Heap and Dennis Pitta or Ed Dixon. Actually, back then it was mainly Heap and Dixon because Pitta was the third guy in that rotation. And actually, it was Dixon who was supposed to be the starting guy when the Ravens released Heap after 2010. But it was Heap who became the number one tight end because him and Flacco just clicked, and Dixon eventually, Dixon obviously had trouble catching the football, but there was a brief period where Dixon and Pitta looked like a pretty good 1-2 combo at tight end. 2014, I think you could have seen a pretty good 1-2 combo with Pitta and Owen Daniels, but Pitta got hurt, unfortunately, in a non-contact injury against Cleveland. But they were looking to be a very nice 1-2 tight end with Pitta and Owen Daniels. But now you got Andrews, now you got Isaiah Likely, who have looked like a pretty good pairing the last 2 years together. And now both are on contract years, both looking for big seasons. I think both of them could have a big year for them in this Monken offense. Especially in year 3 now with under Monken's offense, and especially with both looking for new contracts, especially Isaiah Likely. So I think both could be really good together. I think both could have good seasons, and I think Likely is going to get a contract, and he will be the tight end of the future for this team. Could be in 2026, maybe 2027. Who knows? I think it will be 2026, but we'll see what happens with Andrews. But I think Likely, yeah, I think he's going to be the tight end of the future. I think they like him a lot. They love his talent. I think if you watch him, you love what you see. I think I think he will be the number one tight end pretty soon. Maybe not this season, but I think they'll get an extension with him done. And I think he'll be the number one tight end pretty soon. If not this year, maybe next year, or even not next year, 2027. Um, in other news around Ravens minicamp, so that's the contract stuff with Andrews and Likely. Another news on minicamp, it's the kicker position. Ah, the Ravens and kickers. Ravens have had a pretty good history with kickers. Matt Stover, like I said, even Billy Cundiff had a couple of good years before the 2011 championship game. Of course, Justin Tucker. But now with Tucker's situation, and they had to part ways with Tucker. They had to part ways with Tucker. Now they find themselves in a kicker bind. Now they find themselves trying to find a kicker for the first time since that 2012 offseason when they were looking to see if Tucker could beat out Billy Cundiff. And then he did, and then he took off into a Hall of Fame career. But now, now they have to look for a new kicker. And they drafted Tyler Luke in the draft in the sixth round. First time in Ravens history they've ever drafted a kicker. They've always looked at undrafted free agency, like it was Hauschka or Tucker or Will Lutz. But this time they drafted a kicker, and it was Tyler Luke. And unfortunately, he's had a bit of a rocky start. TAs was a bit rocky. Minicamp again was a bit rocky for him. But in his last practice, Tyler Luke, he went 3 for 4 in the live field goal portion. He missed one up to 65 yards. His competition right now is John Hoyland. But Tyler Loop, again, has had a very, very rocky, very inconsistent start to his practices, both in OTAs and minicamp. And it gives them, it's early. It's very early. It's very early. But you got to think, you got to think that the Ravens are watching closely with this. The Ravens are watching this very closely. Um, so if Loop doesn't improve pretty soon, or if Hoyland doesn't show you, maybe he's the guy. But especially Tyler Luke, because again they drafted him. If Tyler Luke doesn't show, much improvement, if Tyler Luke doesn't show much improvement, then they might have to search for a kicker. They might have to search for a kicker before training camp. And if you look at the kicker free agencies, if we look at the free agent kickers that are available, it's not a lot right now. It's not a lot right now. So is Nick Folk still available? Hold on a minute. Is Nick Folk still? I mean, is Nick Folk still kick? Is Nick Folk still a free agent? Yeah, he is. Nick Folk is still a free agent. I'd sign him. I've always been a big Nick Folk fan. I've always been a big Nick Folk fan. Let me see. Because again, like a kicker, look, sometimes you don't think you need a kicker, but then you get to the season. Sometimes, again, kicker is sometimes one of the last things you think you need entering a season. But then the season begins, and you go, "Oh, we need a kicker." You know, you go, "Oh, we need a kicker now." It's one of those funny positions uh, that you don't think you need at the beginning of the season, but then it happens. But then the season begins, and you go, "Oh, wait, we need a kicker now." um, well, let's see. Let's see. But it's something interesting to watch. Obviously, when they get to training camp, this is a team that might need a kicker. This is a team that might need a kicker when they hit training camp, especially if Tyler Luke continues to be a bit rocky and struggle uh, into training camp. Let's see. Greg Zerline's still available. Here we go. Zerline's available, but he struggled a lot last year with the Jets. Yeah, Nick Folk. Hey, sign Nick Folk. Sign Nick Folk. Nick Folk's my boy. Nick Folk's my boy. I love Nick Folk. Sign Nick Folk. If you don't like what you see out of John Hoyland, if you don't like what you see out of if you don't like what you see out of Tyler, give Nick Folk a call. Give Nick Folk a call. That guy is a big leg kicker, veteran presence. He's played on a dozen teams. He's always reliable, always good. I go get Nick. If you don't like what you see, get Nick Folk. I've been a big Nick Folk guy. Matt Prater, Eddie Pinero, Michael Badgley. Austin Seibert, Zane Gonzalez, Riley Patterson, Cade York. Uh, so yeah, those are the ones available. Yeah, Nick Folk's 41, but man, the dude can still kick a football. Nick Folk is 41, but the dude can still kick. Guy's good. I've always been a fan of his, but I would sign Nick Folk. If the Ravens don't like what they see out of Tyler Loop, if they don't see much, if he's still being rocky and inconsistent, you got to sign a guy. You're gonna have to sign a guy. Again, the Ravens are going for the Super Bowl, so you gotta get the guys that you know can help you. You're going for the Super Bowl. You don't want the Super Bowl to come. You don't want the kicker to be the one that costs you there. Like I said, back in 2011, Billy Cundiff's missed kick, but especially with this team though. So if you don't like what you see in training camp, if you're not seeing improvement from Tyler Loop, and hopefully there is improvement. Look, the Ravens probably prefer their draft pick, Tyler Loop, to be good. They prefer that instead of going out and paying for a veteran kicker. But if Loop is still rocky and inconsistent, and you're not, then you're gonna have to sign a guy. Sign Nick Folk then. I would sign Nick Folk. I would sign Nick Folk. Um, yeah, I would sign Nick Folk. Actually, one more thing on Mark Andrews I thought was pretty cool. Uh, he drew some big cheers at Ravens minicamp when he caught a pass down the seam from Jackson and raced downfield in front of PSL guests on hand. So PSL, I thought that was cool. That was pretty cool for the fans in attendance, the guests on hand to give Andrews an applause. I don't think, to go back to Andrews for a second, I don't think Andrews will be booed or anything by M&T Bank Stadium in that first home game in week 2. I don't think or even in the preseason. I don't think there'll be, but it is cool to see some fans, the PSL guests, give him a cheer, give him applause. Because again, he deserves it. He's a great player. He's done a lot for this team, done a lot in the community. He's a great player, and I would not like to see Ravens fans M&T Bank start booing the guy because they're upset with him for the playoff game. Look, it's sports. It happens. He's a great and again, he's a good player and a good guy. So I'm happy to see that. Um, let's touch on Jackson's extension talks. Let's touch on that because again, now Lamar again was asked about it in his presser the other 2 days ago, but he didn't talk about it. Obviously not going to talk about it, of course. It's going to be private. It's a private thing. You know, the deal will be done when it's done. The contract will be done when it's done. But a little insight on where this contract could possibly go and what we're looking at here with this contract. I think Joel Curry of CBS Sports said we're looking at about 65 million. I think they said 65 million. Joel Curry said the extension could be about $65 million. And yeah, you know, although he also said if they wait it out till 2026, it could go up to 70 million. But that's actually why the Ravens want to get this thing done now, because they don't want to wait till this thing gets to 70 million. So they want to get this thing done now so it doesn't get up to 70 million. But according to Joe Curry, you're looking at about 70 or so million. You're looking at about 65 or so $1 million for Jackson when this contract eventually happens. Let me get the full quote here from Joel Curry per CBS Sports. Jackson could get an extension worth at least $65 million per year in his next contract. He brings that weighting up to 2026, will make the cost go up as growth of the salary cap could lead to the deal surpassing $70 million. So not just $70 million, surpassing $70 million. He also thinks Jackson should only commit to 3 new contract years, regardless of when the extension comes, and he should insist on having great cash flow similar to cornerback Derek Stingley Jr.'s contract. Look, Jackson, I think, is going to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot of money. He's going to get the contract he wants. I think likely that contract's going to come before training camp, during training camp, something like that. I think it will come there. But again, I think it'll be around the 65 million, maybe a touch more. I think the Ravens would rather get that thing done now. I can see why Curry says, "Hey, guarantee just 3 contracts," because hey, you're still young, you're in your prime. You very well could win another MVP in the next 3 years. So if you do 3 contract years, you win another MVP, you get more because that quarterback money goes up every single year. quarterback money goes up, goes up every single year. So I can see why Curry would suggest that. Just do 3 contract years, 3 guaranteed contract years. Maybe you win an MVP or even two, but maybe you win an MVP in those next 3 years, and maybe you win a Super Bowl in those next 3 years. And all of a sudden, you want more money, and you get that money because again, the contracts of these quarterbacks constantly goes up year after year after year after year after year, and more guys will get paid as the years go on, year after year after year after year after year. Hey, C.J. Stroud, he's going to get paid pretty soon. Jaden Daniels, after that great rookie year, hey, he continues that, he'll get paid. So those contract numbers are going to come up year after year after year after year after year. Jalen Hurts, I'm sure, will get a new contract, and he just won a Super Bowl and Super Bowl MVP. He recently just got paid a few years ago, but he keeps doing the way he's doing. He'll get paid again. Joe Burrow, same thing. Josh Allen just got a new contract. These quarterback numbers, they go up year after year after year. So I can see why Curry was suggesting that. But I don't think this will be like a few years ago. Obviously not. Jackson's gonna get paid. He'll get his contract, and he'll get what he deserves. I think it'll be around 65, maybe even a touch more than that. Um, Got to talk about the offensive line, which is probably the biggest question mark coming into this team with Voorhees and Falale with the guard positions, Emory Jones, an offensive tackle. So that's the offensive line. They come in with certainly the biggest question marks on the team heading into the season. Again, the biggest thing, you got to protect your investment. You got to protect your quarterback. You got to protect Lamar. So you got your stalwarts at offensive line. You got your stalwarts. You got Ronnie Stanley, who you got an extension done with him earlier in the offseason. Tyler Lindenbaum, who will definitely get a contract soon. He's another one that's up for a contract, along with Kyle Hamilton. He'll get a contract. Um, you know, you got Roger Rosengarten, who had a very good rookie season, but you have the other guard position that's a question, and you have the other tackle position that's a question. For Emory Jones, John Harbaugh said he should return at some point in training camp at the third round, but he's unlikely to be available at the start of training camp. But in terms of the other guard position, Voorhees and Falale are both in the lead for starting guard, but they know they have to play well. And yeah, Falale to start the season last year had his struggles, but actually kind of settled in at the beginning, towards the end of last season. But again, they both have to play well. They have three guaranteed spots at offensive line: Stanley, Linderbaum, and Rosengard. They need to find the other two spots. They need to find the other two spots. So got to find the other two spots. So will it be Voorhees? Will it be Falale? We'll see. Falale again, like I said, very good. He kind of played well, played pretty decently towards once the season once the season was going on, as the season went on. But he had some early season struggles, and it looked, he had early season struggles, but he got better as the season went on. So, but again, it's a competition there. It's competition to right tackle, so we'll see what happens there. Um, Got to touch on we'll talk a little bit more about Jaire Alexander. Again, Alexander is a Baltimore Raven, signing for a 1-year contract, $4 million, could go up to $6 million. Again, a pretty good contract for one of the best by the Ravens, for one of the best corners in all of football. He didn't practice, but he sat and watched practice. We had a couple of comments from Ravens players like Marlon Humphrey. Again, if you're Marlon Humphrey, you got to be super excited to have him there. You got to be super excited to have someone like Jaire Alexander in the room with you. So Kyle Hamilton, again, got to be excited. He said, Kyle Hamilton, quote, "Great addition. He's been one of the best in the league since he got in it." Yep, that's true. Yeah, if you are Hamilton, if you're Humphrey, if you're Wiggins, you're Alexander, you got to be really excited to have these guys both. You got to be really excited to have Jaire Alexander on your roster. If you're Jaire Alexander, you got to be really excited to join a secondary with Marlon Humphrey, with Nate Wiggins, with Kyle Hamilton, with Malachi Starks, the rookie first round pick. You got to be really excited to watch to add on to that. Humphrey said the options are endless. It's going to be a fun secondary. Yeah. Hey, John Harbaugh said John Harbaugh said we wanted to have him here. We wanted him here, and he wanted to be here. I know Lamar's happy. Yeah, Lamar's very happy, John. Yes, Coach Harbaugh, Lamar Jackson is very happy. He's a very happy man to have his best friend and college buddy back. reunited with him, teaming with him with the Ravens. But yeah, if you're Humphrey, you love the options. You love having all those toys and all those options around the secondary. If you're Zachary Orr, you love having all those toys to play with. But it's a very exciting secondary, as Marlon Humphrey said. It's going to be a fun secondary. Yeah, it should be a very fun secondary. It should be a very, very fun secondary to watch. It could be one of the best secondaries the Ravens have ever had. 2000, they had a tremendous secondary. Kim Herring, Rod Woodson, Chris McAllister, Dwayne Starks. They had a tremendous secondary in 2000. They had a pretty good secondary. They had pretty good secondaries. It was McAllister and Ed Reed, Chris McAllister and Ed Reed, Samari Rolle, Gary Baxter. Um, they've had some very good secondaries over the years. This could be a very, very good, fun secondary. Ladarius Webb. This could be a very good, fun secondary. Jimmy Smith. This could be a very fun secondary. A very fun secondary to watch. Bernard Pollard. This could be a very fun secondary to watch if you're the Ravens. You just look at this again, and I said before in the last show, this is exactly what you need to have. Exactly what you need to have when you're in an AFC with Mahomes, Allen, and Burrow. And you could be facing those guys, Burrow twice, maybe three times, Allen twice, Mahomes twice. You need to have a good secondary, good pass rush too, but you need to have a good secondary to win those games and to win those games in January. So again, you gotta be excited for it. And a little bit more on Jaire Alexander. Adam Schefter reported that there was other teams looking for Alexander, of course. Of course there were. The Carolina Panthers are one of them, and they offered him more money. Just like other teams did, they offered him more money. Yeah, you know, like we said before, there were reports before that other teams were offering him more money, but he wanted to come to a contender, Ravens, and he wants a chance to win, and he wanted to be with Lamar. It really is that simple. It's contending team with a chance to win a Super Bowl. And oh yeah, your good friend, your good buddy is the franchise quarterback for the team. It all adds up, you know. It all adds up. That's why he joined. So one last thing before we conclude the show for today. Uh the retirement of CJ Mosley. CJ Mosley today, former Ravens middle linebacker. Actually, I'm wearing a Derrick Henry jersey. I probably should wear the CJ Mosley. I have a CJ Mosley jersey. I do. I have a CJ Mosley jersey, but I'm wearing a Derrick Henry jersey. I should have worn the CJ Mosley jersey. But maybe I'll wear it the next show. Yeah, I'll wear it the next show. But CJ Mosley today announced his retirement. Um, what he only spent. I wanted to do a quick little retrospective on his career because he both played in Baltimore, but also here in New York with the Jets. Wanted to do a quick retrospective, a quick thing about his career. I think CJ Mosley, man, I think was he's such a key figure for the Ravens. He only played 5 years for the team, and I tell you, when he made that interception against the Cleveland Browns to clinch the division title, I really thought the Ravens would resign him. I really did, but obviously he went to the Jets, and obviously there were some injuries there with the Jets, and obviously 2020 COVID year he didn't play, but overall for the Jets he did well there too. Was a very good tackler, very good leader in the locker room. That's what he was with the Ravens, a good tackler, stopped the run, and was a good leader and was a very good leader in the clubhouse, a very good leader in the locker room. I think CJ Mosley's importance with the Ravens, especially over the last several years, is the fact that he came in after Ray Lewis's retirement. 2 years after Ray Lewis's retirement, they drafted C.J. Mosley in the first round, middle of the first round, 2014. The year before, in 2013, the first year without Ray Lewis, they signed Darryl Smith, who had a very good year and a very good career with the Ravens overall. A couple of years he was there, but they drafted Arthur Brown. They also signed Rolando McClain, and he didn't play. They signed Rolando McClain, but he didn't play that year. So they were kind of making. Then they drafted Arthur Brown in 2013, and he didn't. And him and Matt Elam, didn't contribute. Didn't play well. He and Matt Elam struggled, but they drafted Arthur Brown, hoping Arthur Brown would be that guy. They had Rolando McClain. They signed Darryl Smith. So middle linebacker was kind of a mix and match for them in 2013, that first year after Ray Lewis. But Mosley, he comes in and he gave them a presence in the middle. He gave them that presence in the middle again. He gave them that presence in the middle of the defense again, just like Ray Lewis did for all those years, for 17 years. Mosley was a very good player overall. Uh, Five-time All-Pro, five-time Pro Bowler, 1,000+ tackles. Again, a very good leader in the locker room. Players loved him, team loved him. I would have loved to have seen him back with the Ravens after the 2018 season, but again, he went to the Jets. I think Mosley's inch in history is he gave the Ravens that that presence in the middle, you know, after Ray Lewis. When Ray Lewis retired, that first year when Ray Lewis retired, it was like I said, it was a bit of a flux. Darryl Smith was good, but again, there was Ronald McLean and Arthur Brown. So they tried again in the draft after Arthur Brown, and they got Mosley, and that worked pretty well. He did well, CJ Mosley. Again, maybe he wanted more than 5 years, but he did well for those 5 years from 2014 to 2018 as that presence in the middle of the field in the middle linebacker position. So I think so. Roquan Smith does it now after they traded for him, and he does it well, very well. He's the best middle linebacker in all of football. But for the 5 years before, and even after CJ Mosley left in free agency, who was the middle linebackers? And before Roquan Smith, but in the after Mosley left in free agency for the Jets, and before they traded for Roquan Smith in 2022, who was the middle linebackers? It was Patrick Queen, who was okay. LJ Ford. They brought back Josh Bynes. Again, it was a mix and match of middle linebackers for those first couple of years, 2019 to 2021, until they got Roquan Smith and he became that presence in the middle again, until they traded for him from Chicago. So, but CJ Mosley from 2014 to 2018, one of the best guys in the locker room, one of the best guys in the team, who he gave the Ravens that presence again in the middle of the field in that middle linebacker position, uh, with Ray Lewis, or after Ray Lewis, and after when Ray Lewis retired, Mosley gave him that presence again in the middle of the field, middle linebacker spot, when Ray Lewis retired. So big kudos to him. Congratulations to Mosley on a very good career, very solid, very good career at middle linebacker. And I think he was one of the best Ravens that they had for those 5 years he was there, and certainly of the last decade from 2014 to now. Certainly one of the best Ravens over the last decade. So congratulations to him on a very good career, and congratulations to him on his retirement. I'd like to see him become a coach. Mosley's a smart guy, smart player, smart guy. I like to see him kind of what Zach Orr's done. I like to see him get into coaching. I like to see him get into coaching. But I'm interested. So it'd be nice to see. I think it'd be really cool to see Mosley get into coaching. I think he's a very smart guy, very smart player. I think he can add a lot to the coaching, to coaching. But yeah, congratulations to CJ Mosley on a good career. Congratulations to him on his retirement. So that'll about do it for this edition of Mazza on Ravens. I think the next show you'll see Mazza on Ravens will be sometime before we will do another Mazza on Ravens, barring any other news from the Ravens if they sign another guy trade. Barring any other news from the Ravens, we'll do a preview of training camp the day before training camp starts. We'll do a preview of training camp for that. The day before camp starts, we'll preview competitions. We'll preview where we think the team is going to be. Talk about other things in the preseason matchups and regular season, upcoming regular season stuff like that. So we'll get into more about the Ravens training camp on the day right before it starts. For now, obviously, stay tuned for tomorrow. It'll be our latest edition of Mazza on Mets. Stay tuned tomorrow for our latest edition of Mazza on Mets. There'll be a lot to talk about the New York Mets as of late. Certainly, there'll be a lot to talk about with the New York Mets. Certainly, with their recent stretch of games. But we'll get into that tomorrow on Mazza on Mets. We're talking all things Mets. But for now, this has been Evan Mazza for Mazza on Ravens, where we talk all things Baltimore Ravens. I've been your host, Evan Mazza. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for sticking around and watching. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a like and subscribe when you can. Thank you very much. This has been Evan Mazza of Mazza on Ravens, and we'll see you tomorrow for a new episode of Mazza on Mets. Have a great day, and let's go Ravens.